Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live event for February. Today, we're going to be addressing the gender gap in foundership, and I'm so excited to have three extremely inspiring ladies joining me later on today to talk about such an important topic. But before we dive into today's conversation, I would like to take a moment to obviously recognise that it is International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So it's a day that's obviously dedicated to celebrating the achievements of women, and us talking about entrepreneurship, foundership just feels like a really fitting time to have this conversation. So if you're completely new to a Lift Up Live broadcast, you've not joined us before, then we love to make this as an interactive event as possible. We've been established for about 2.5 years now. We've had over 100,000 global views. We've had 70 odd key speakers every month join me for some great topics. And really, our mission here is all about connecting, inspiring, and championing women right from academia all the way through to C-suite board advisory level positions within life sciences. And I'm Louise Williams. I've been in staffing now for 20 years. I've been in life sciences for just over 10 years now. I'm a managing director at Fraser-Dove International, which is an executive search life sciences talent consultancy. And it was around 2.5 years ago that a group of us ambassadors internally at FDI thought, what could we do to try and give back to the industry that we're in? Because we currently at FDI, we kind of support at that senior complex leadership layer of hiring within life sciences. And we've got so many great relationships with women internationally that we thought, let's bring them into some live broadcasts, some podcasts, some blogs, get them sharing their experiences, their journeys, their hurdles and challenges to just really help try and inspire and connect with other people. So thank you to everybody that's been a part of the journey. It's been amazing. And as I said, today we're talking about the female foundership and how important that is. So please say hello if you're dialing in. We've got a lovely comment section. I'd love for you to state where it is that you're dialing in from, what positions you hold within the business. We have some repeat attendees. We've had over 250 now, I think, that signed up. We often get 3,000 people rewatching this as well. So just try and get as interactive as possible. And as we move throughout the broadcast, I'd love to ask you to put a Q in front of any question within the comments that you would like to ask the key speakers today. We've had some questions come through from the community group that we're going to discuss in the first part, but please just keep some questions flowing through and I'll try to get through them as best as I possibly can throughout the live. So without further ado, I'd love to bring in our live speakers, and we've got Abby who's joining us first. Hello, Abby. If you could do an introduction to the audience for us, that would be amazing.
Great. Well, thanks, Louise, and thanks for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm a partner at Third Rock Ventures, which is a venture firm that does company creation and really looks at building companies, integrating technology and products and really trying to make a difference in patients' lives. So that's really an exciting task to be involved in. I'm a scientist by training. I started my career at Genentech in the 80s. Got to work on a lot of different novel protein replacement therapies and antibody therapies in the early sort of pioneering days of biotech. I've also done a couple stints in pharma, wound up at 𝐼𝐴𝐻, which became Pfizer for a while, as well as Novartis, also other biotech companies, including Millennium Pharmaceuticals, and then got into more of the startup world, was a serial entrepreneur, 2 companies, that one sold, one launched, and then went public. And then I joined Third Rock about 8 years ago as a general partner here.
Thank you, Abby. Very inspiring. Pharmaceutical, biotech, now VC, an inspiring career journey that you've had. And I'm really pleased to have you on the live broadcast today. Melanie, lovely to have you here. If you could do an introduction as well for the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a founder. I'm on to founding my second company now. My first one was Prellis Biologics. I am also a scientist by training, a PhD out of a physiology biophysics department with a special focus on immunology. And I took some of the interesting laser-based technology we use to study immunology, and I figured out a way to turn it into a useful set of production tools for creating human tissue and now biomanufacturing.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, so you've had a great journey as well. And I think if I understand it rightly, was it 8 years, 9 years or so it's starting up Prellis, and now you've
That's
almost
right.
taken something and doing a spin-off with Lyrics. So that's very inspiring. Thank you, Melanie. It's great to have you here today. And last but most certainly not least, we've got Sheila. If you could do an introduction to the audience for us.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you so much to the Lift Up community. I love your vision and mission, and so happy to be part of this effort. I'm Sheila 𝐾𝐲. I am a clinician by training, so I am a physician, biotech executive, entrepreneur, and investor, and very importantly, also a co-founder of the Biotech CEO Sisterhood that I'd be happy to talk more about, because it's been such a great community for female founders and CEOs. I got my start after my clinical training, so my residency and fellowship in academic medicine. I actually left to go to McKinsey for a few years, and from there, I went into biotech at Genentech. Was there for a number of years, first in commercial, then in R&D. And then I went to BMS, where I ran immunology. So I really had a great global biopharma experience as a executive. And about 15 years ago, I transitioned to small biotech, so emerging biotech. And I was fortunate to have a great exit at a company called Receptos, where I was the chief medical officer. I also took that public, and we sold to Celgene in 2015. And then I got into foundership. So I involved in co-founding and becoming CEO of a company called 𝐆𝐞𝐲 Bio, which I also took public and did many rounds of financing for. And then I've been a board director and chairwoman of several companies. So I've taken several companies public, and I'm now getting involved back into foundership roles as well as investor roles, and helping to start up a private fund with a large hedge fund. So really thrilled to be here today, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. That's an amazing introduction, Sheila. And actually, a couple of things going through my mind is, Abby and Sheila, did you work at Genentech at the same time? No, I just realized that there was that connection there.
I'm definitely the senior attendee here. I was at Genentech from 85 to 93. So
I was doing my medical training then. So I am also senior, Abby, but no, I actually looked up Abby's background to see if we overlapped. And
you didn't know. But between you all, hugely inspiring. I mean, Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of were in the academia space and almost launched into foundership and creating your own business almost quite early. And then we've got a combination of Sheila. I think you went into the kind of commercial space from McKinsey into Genentech, but then went from commercial straight to R&D, and then up through medical lead of an immunology franchise. So, and then Abby, now in VC for 8 years. So such an inspiring collective group of experience that we've got here. So really pleased to kickstart this live broadcast. Just going to jump into the comments quickly, because we've got some people saying hello. So thank you so much. Keep your hellos and your comments and things coming through. We've got Sean dialing in from our Farnham office. Thanks for dialing in, Sean. We've got Palami, who's excited to be a part of this, dialing in from India, currently CEO and a co-founder of 𝐸𝐞𝐳 Therapeutics. Thank you very much for joining us. What's really great to see, which has always been the case with Lift Up, is we've had a really good global reach. So it's so lovely to see lots of people dialing in. Please put where it is that you're coming in from as well. Daniela, excited to be here. We've got a LinkedIn user who's joining for the first time in San Francisco Bay. Thank you very much for dialing in. If it says LinkedIn user, it might just be because you've got your settings set to privacy. But thank you for joining us. We've got Charlotte as well here, calling in from Switzerland. So yeah, please keep the comments coming through. And as I may have said right at the beginning, if you've got some questions for our speakers, just pop in a queue at the front of the comments, and I will try to come to them as we go throughout the live broadcast. So we're going to set the scene, kicking off with addressing this gender gap. We've got some great topics, questions, things coming through from the barriers that you've been faced as female founders, from looking at from a future focused perspective, what do we need to look at and continue trying to do to close the gap. But really, just to set the scene, a question here is, what's inspired you all individually to enter the life sciences space, and what's your kind of journey been like as a founder or a co-founder? I'm going to come to you first, Melanie, with this question.
Yeah, so I absolutely loved life sciences before I understood what life sciences were. I was fortunate enough to grow up in the Bay Area, kind of in the hills, and I enjoyed hiking, and as a kid, this was just kind of my passion. And so I ended up falling into science because it just matched everything I love to do. And so it was very organic, really. Probably a pun in there somewhere. Very, very organic for me. And when you find a passion like that, and especially being a female founder, I went through and a scientist, I went through classes where often I was the only woman in the class in college. And I think it forces you to be brave when you know that you're following a passion of yours.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to hear the no's when you know how much you love it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And were you studying in academia then, a science kind of college degree, and then kind of what got you straight into the industry? Was there any kind of connection there?
Well, I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I've always been excited about what I was doing as a researcher, making it to people. And so, I had a couple great mentors in my PhD who have been part of companies themselves. Also in my postdoc, I did a postdoc with Jeff Bluestone, who went on to start Sonoma Bio, and, very entrepreneurial crew I was exposed to. And I thought, I could do this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
no one was there to tell me no, and I wasn't listening anyway. So, jumped right in. Towards the end of my
Well, no, that's great. And I think what you've just said there, maybe something we touch on later, is just that power of connectivity, mentorship, community, just identifying people even at that earlier age in academia or in universities, and seeing and connecting to those individuals that may have been there, done it, to try and learn off of them is really important. So yeah, I love that, Melanie. And Abby, what kind of inspired you, I guess?
I think that I loved science. I mean, it was just from the time I was very small. It was just something I knew I was going to do, but I didn't know how you could do science and make it matter. I originally was anticipating that I would go to med school. That's what my father thought I should do, and it did seem like you could make an impact that way. So, but when I did my undergrad at UC San Diego, it was a very small college at the time, and it was mostly a grad school. They were just bringing in undergrads at that point in time. So most of us did research as undergrads, and most of us had, professors who were very active in doing research. And it gave me that sort of insight. And I knew then that I really wanted to try and figure out how I could take the science and turn it into products, to be honest. You'd start to hear people talk about the early revolutions in biotech, and early days of biotech were manufacturing. People don't even know that, but it was basically clone and express. And if you could do that, you could make something that otherwise had to be harvested from a human source, for example, or an animal source. And so it was very applied, and it was sort of exciting to me. And so when I did my undergrad or my grad work, I just took all the efforts to get to know people who were affiliated with the sort of budding biotechs. Even though I was in Arizona at the time, there was no biotech there. It was just a integrated program that I was in, that you took a couple of years of med school classes, and then you didn't do a clinical rotation, you did, laboratory rotations. And there were so many people who were affiliated with clinical trials that then got you affiliated with different companies. And that actually is what got me to Genentech, was those kinds of connections. And so it was literally just knowing that I wanted to be able to make an impact and put things in the hands of physicians who could then, help patients with a novel therapeutic.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, thanks, Abby. That's a lovely story. And Sheila, you've kind of now come on to multi businesses now. What kind of inspired you? Did you get inspired earlier on, or were you inspired as you kind of grew in the positions and the businesses that you worked within?
Yeah, very similar themes to really to Melanie and Abby. But in some ways, I really had no idea about industry. I shared earlier that I was very focused on being a physician. I was told by my parents I was going to be a physician, like that was what I was going to do. And I wasn't really thinking about anything. In fact, I kind of grew up thinking business was a negative. People who really wanted to, was really more profit centered. And,
Yes.
I very much wanted to be someone of service and be, altruistic. And that was a really core principle that I grew up with. Both my parents are physicians. So just, understanding how can I be of service in my life and career.
Yeah.
And when I was in Boston at the Brigham doing my internal medicine residency, industry was kind of a bad word. I mean, we didn't talk about industry. It was the dark side. And I want to mention this because that's really how my initial mindset and training, anchored me. But when I moved to the Bay Area, kind of similar stories, and I was doing my fellowship at UCSF and Stanford. It was a combined program. I then got exposed to all these amazing clinicians who were working at in industry. So actually half of my faculty attending were volunteer, coming in from Genentech, Chiron, PDL, other startups. And I started to realize, how much of an impact I could make as a clinician and a translational researcher in a larger company, and that there were multiple career options for someone like myself with a clinical background and a translational research background.
Yeah.
And I also decided that I wanted to have potentially more of an impact that I could have individually working one-on-one with patients and their families. Very, very meaningful. But I realized that I could have a much broader impact, working in the corporate world. And so I ended up leaving medicine, going to McKinsey for a few years. And then when I was there, I did a lot of consulting projects with large pharma, incredible, portfolios and pipelines, but I wasn't really resonating with the culture at the time, in terms of kind of the bureaucracy and decision-making. And so I realized that I liked to move a little bit faster. I like to get things done. And I have this kind of practical side to me. And from there, I decided to go to biotech, and get back to kind of innovative cutting edge science, but in a way that's still, resourced. So I ended up joining Genentech, and that kind of kicked off my industry career.
I love that, and that whole story could be really enlightening for many that are listening, because I think that you're right. You're kind of, I love the fact that the GPs, the physicians, that one-to-one is obviously hugely important to to the market globally, but actually it shouldn't be seen as moving to the dark side. It's just a different side of and different skill set that you're using to impact people in different ways, sometimes larger resource groups, whether it's specific therapeutic areas. It sounds like as well your journey, and what I hear a lot from board and C-suite individuals, is that in order to kind of fully function and operate in the best way possible at those levels, having that diversity of skill set, whether it's commercial, whether it's medical, whether it's large pharma or small bio, and kind of the more collective experience you get in different environments, it kind of helps you when you're in those more senior leadership, operational roles. So all of you have obviously got really inspiring journeys in that respect. But we've talked about what's inspired you into the industry. Maybe let's talk more about, as you've been a founder and as you've been co-founders, maybe what some of the challenges have been and that you've maybe faced. Obviously don't want to kickstart a big controversy conversation, but try to be as authentic and honest as you can, around some of the challenges that you have faced. So Melanie, coming to you with this one, it's quite a broad question, obviously.
It is a broad question. Well, a couple things come to mind immediately. So part of the reason I didn't try to build what I was doing in academia and I left is that it really plays at the nexus of engineering and immunology and kind of tissue engineering, biophysics. And, any granting agency would look at me and say, why is an immunologist building a supercharged laser system for bioprinting? They just wouldn't, the silos don't overlap, right? And so, I knew that I could probably get some people interested in this in industry, or sorry, in the investment community. And I was lucky enough to do that. And it was great. And it was a slog. But I think, convincing people that I did have the engineering chops to do this. And, I did have the experience. That was an immediate kind of question mark for a lot of people still. It was no longer the academic silo, but it was, we are convinced you're very smart, but can you actually do this? And so, I'm not totally sure, because I don't know what the diligence process would have been for a man, but I did have lots of deep diligence processes, and I had to get a lot of different engineers from different backgrounds get their heads nodding before I got that check mark. Yeah, and the investment.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you saying that, so from the scientific medical side, but it was kind of bringing in the commercial aspect as well, and kind of how did you go and sort of source that extra talent? Is that how it
Yeah, so
works?
that was another thing I would bring up too as a potential challenge, is really recruiting talent to work with you as well, right? Convincing people that, yeah, it's okay to leave your LiDAR company and come work for this tissue engineering company. And, they've maybe perhaps never worked on a women-led team before. And so that's always an interesting transition. I feel like I could, at this point in my career, after over a decade, I think I can tell who has and who hasn't worked with a
Yeah.
woman before.
Yeah. And Sheila, coming to you with the same question then, what's been some of the biggest challenges that you've perhaps faced?
Yeah, so I do think, the network is very important when you are starting a business and building a business. And so for me, because I came at it very differently, I had all these roles in different companies, and I had been choosing companies and institutions to work with really great, smart people. So the Brigham, UCSF, Stanford, McKinsey. What an amazing network from McKinsey. I tap into my McKinsey network, many of whom became investors. They're hedge fund. They work at hedge funds. They work at VCs. They work at private equity. They've been very successful in their right. So just having that kind of network, it's been incredibly helpful for me. And then the Genentech alum network, the BMS alum network, and then of course, taking 3 companies public. I was on the public side for about 10 years. I did some private financing at Receptos, but then it was and at Gossamer, but then it was very much on the public side. So I had basically established credibility as a biotech executive, as a drug developer. I got a number of drugs approved. So I kind of went in really hardcore on the R&D side and just did a lot of things, to Melanie's point about building that credibility. So developed a reputation of, when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to deliver those milestones. And I think that was really, really important. And then, and also just taking multiple companies public, I really had great relationship with public investors, and so and private investors. So I had a network. But now, especially in the Biotech CEO Sisterhood, there are about over 300 women CEOs in this network, many of whom are first-time founders coming out of academia, from different backgrounds, and some of them don't have that network, so they just don't know which investors to speak to. So kind of figuring out who to work with. That's one. Absolutely the credibility thing. I mean, again, I don't think people will doubt that these women and men, men who are academic founders too, coming out, are brilliant. But do they know what it takes to run a company? Do they understand? Can they build a team of people to surround them? Do they have any business acumen? Because they may be brilliant scientifically, but investors look at lots of different aspects. So I think those are some of the key things from that I think that have been the challenges that I've seen. And I think they're going into some advice, and we can come back to it, is it's really surrounding yourself with amazing advisors and building what I call your personal board of directors, or finding your people who are going to really help you understand what are your blind spots and help you build out those networks, and sometimes partnering with maybe a seasoned industry expert and developing those networks. But the more you can do to build networks through your entrepreneurship, through your academic institutions, through your business schools, even if you're not in business school, but going to those types of events, I think that's really important as you're thinking about developing the ideas for your business, and then starting that, and then scaling. So really through every step of the way.
Yeah.
It's really critical.
That's some great advice, Sheila, and I think it's fair to say that there's multiple prongs, isn't there, to setting up an organisation and a business and founding it. Because, like you said, I mean, Melanie, leaving almost academia, having an idea, being really medically, clinically astute, launching then into Prellis, which was a phenomenal business, 8 years plus now. but it is very different from then being in industry, being commercial, being medical, being in a business for maybe 15 plus years, having that network already and leveraging off of that network to go and spin off and create something new. So so I think you're right, the mentorship, the sponsorship, the community group, the networking, like trying to build, I love what you just described it there as a personal board of directors, Sheila, is a really nice way of looking at it. And then Abby, from your perspective, not only obviously as a founder, but now working for Third Rock for 8 years, do you feel like as a VC, as a partner, what challenges have you come across or seen on the other side of the fence for businesses that are trying to set up from maybe academia, very early stages versus, seasoned professionals maybe? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think that, I'm not going to be able to come up with anything novel because the reality is, it really is this importance of having a network, having sponsorship. And I think sponsorship is very different than mentorship. And I think that having somebody who's willing to open a door for you. So that's what I would say. As I think that what we find is that women have a harder time getting the door opened. Once that's open, then you hear, a pitch that's, potentially not as driven sometimes as, when a guy comes in and, starts to tell you why you have to do this. Women are their approach, and I actually find it wonderful. Their approach is much more about their science, much more about, the how they built the company and why they believe it can be successful. But I think that, getting through the door is hard, right? And so I think that the affiliation that you have through your network, it is really, can you find somebody who can help shepherd you in, at least for the first couple conversations, if you're trying to raise capital. So that's very focused on raising capital. I think as far as building your team, there's always been this, sort of old fashioned, kind of statement of, if you've got an A project and a B team, or a B project and an A team, take the B project because the team will always make the difference. Right.
Yeah.
And so people want to know, can you build that team? How do you draw people in? Who have you been able to draw in? And so I think surrounding yourself with the notable KOLs, from an area before you go in, get that kind of academic affiliation. If you're from academia, it's easier for you to get surrounding yourself by, people who are going to be the go-tos from the investor perspectives, or even from pharma if they're diligencing something that you're doing. So I think that, it's pretty much consistent with what everybody is saying. I just think that there's this active, this act of asking for somebody to help you get through the door. Could you make that introduction for me? And once you're in, then know that you've got to show them that you understand the business, but you understand the human capital side as well as the financial capital side, which that balance is really important. And I think that you have to be really careful to know that people are going to come at you with a lot of questions, with a lot of, doubt, with a lot of skepticism. And how do you handle yourself through that? How do you read that room and not get yourself stuck in just wanting to tell your story, but hearing the questions that they're asking, and then morphing to the point of asking them questions, and having it be an exchange. All of those things I think are often harder for women to do naturally, especially if it's in a group of men. So it's just finding that comfort, when you walk through that door, and knowing that you're going to have to morph what you might have wanted your pitch to be to what the group is asking you to make it.
I love that, Abby. I just wanted to add on that.
Yeah, go for it, Sheila.
I mean, just because, to your point, like, investors, when it comes to investing money, and they have, it's like there's so much trust that's involved, and I think for any person who's just not well known, it's like, well, how do I know? And people get so many requests. I'm sure Abby's inundated, with countless requests, and like, well, how do you even sift through that? So that warm introduction from someone who does have network and has that credibility to say, hey, so-and-so is an amazing scientist, and she has delivered time and time again, and she has all the skill sets and abilities to really build a great company. I mean, that just goes such a long way.
Yeah.
It's really priceless.
Would you say, no, that's a very fair point, Sheila. Do you feel like as a VC, Abby, that your attention gets more drawn towards the referrals, the recommendations? Is there, I mean, you must get inundated. Is there any kind of angle in regards to how you view what
Yeah, I mean,
stands out?
I do think if something comes in through an introduction, I am almost obligated to take it, right? Because the person who's making the introduction is obviously going to be someone who knows me and is, taking that risk. And I don't want to not have that benefit of going to that person in the future, right?
Yeah.
So it is, if you have that kind of an introduction, it's great. A cold call, it just doesn't, I don't know any investors who take cold calls.
Okay.
And they come in, by the dozens or hundreds or whatever, and people look you up on the website and try to get that in. So I think that just your ability to find somebody who can get you that intro is a very important sign of your entrepreneurial spirit, your resilience, your grit,
Yeah.
all of those things. So I think
Yeah.
that that's really important. The other thing that I think is very important is the, when you come in, the need to have humility, right? People come in thinking that they have to exercise an aura of intensity and pushiness, and it's so often off-putting to us that we're not even enjoying the engagement, right? But when people come in and they basically are saying, this is my passion, if Melanie walked in, I would be like, oh my God, I just want to sit here and talk to her. That's the sort of thing that you want to convey. You are an entrepreneur. You are starting a company. We know you aren't already, you haven't done this 25 times, and if you have, then you're already in, right?
Yeah.
And
No,
to expand on that, if you don't mind,
go for it,
no, I
Melanie.
think everything here is rung incredibly true, because I had little to no industry experience, and coming from academia, I found two things that both of you have said that have really resonated with how I was able to build Prellis, and networking and meeting everyone you can and taking every opportunity and really putting yourself out there, even if you're just a website and 2 interns, which is how Prellis started, honestly. And I was bootstrapping it and an early IP filing, right? Early patent filing. And then, as Abby said, the best investors I have and the ones that I engage with the most and the ones I'm excited to talk about are the ones that share that passion. And we talk about what we're going to build and how incredible it really could be. And, we get mutually excited about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's
And
really
how did you, I'm going to throw a question, how did you find them?
Oh gosh. As Abby was saying, warm introductions, really going to events, meeting people, telling them about my idea. It takes time. It takes time, and it takes, you have to love it. And that's where the grit comes in. Because you're not going to get a yes on your first day, right?
No. And I think that, it's all hugely inspiring in the sense as well. It was 2020 where I think that we saw around 2.3% of females were being funded and backed by VCs. But 2023, there was an increase to, almost 25%. But they were saying that predominantly that influx was because of the AI technologies and a lot of VCs funding into AI and technology based companies with female co-founders that were leading. So, part of me was just thinking then, is it that maybe we just don't have enough females putting themselves out there to try to, build and found business? Or is it that, yet we still don't quite have the diversity on the VC panels at partners? Is there still that gap of partners and leaders sitting at PEs, VC firms that's creating that disparity? It's probably a combination of it all, isn't it, really? But I was just keen to get kind of your thoughts as to, we've got a bit of a spike that's now increased globally, which is great over the last 2 to 3 years. But do you think we're seeing this as a bit of a long-term trend, or do you think it is just a bit of a spike because of AI technology, over the last couple of years has really picked up? I don't know what your thoughts are with that, Abby.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. There's always something, whether it's AI and tech or whether it was
Mm.
vaccines during
Yeah,
COVID, or,
yeah.
there's always something that is this sort of shiny object that everybody is looking at. One of the key points when you go into in AI and tech is how much money is actually required to get a company off the ground is considerably different than if it's in a therapeutic area or if it's in a biological or technological platform that has a lot of lab requirements, et cetera.
Yes, true.
So
Yes, yeah.
I can see the possibility that as hot as AI and tech is right now, and the fact that you can get something off the ground for considerably less than would probably be required. Now they're able to raise more. It's interesting, but they can actually start with a smaller sum in order to get to something that has that line of sight to value creation. So
Yes.
I do think that it will be helpful, though, because I think that again, once you start to see, successful women leaders, entrepreneurs, then they're out sponsoring people the next round, and it's sort of a feedback loop. I don't think that it is really. I don't think that there's such a bias in the all male partnerships that they wouldn't look at something because it was a female led company. So I
Yeah.
don't think the change is going to be coming that much from a change in the general partnerships. I
Yeah.
think it's just that there's opportunities for women to go in with a scope of something that they could really sell and really execute on without it being the huge risk of some of these more expensive,
Yeah.
sort of holistic, fully integrated biotech companies.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Because I think we've seen that even in the last 12 months alone, there's been an awful lot even in just the UK alone, the amount of AI technology, biotech funded businesses that have start up in the last 12 months in the UK alone is, is so much higher than what we've seen over the past 5 years. But this probably coincides this question. So come to you with this, Sheila, as well, is, what roles do you think then that we might need to look at around policy changes, corporate initiatives, government funding? Like, we know that we maybe just need to have more females coming forward, being comfortable coming forward. I think there is definitely that element there. We've obviously talked about the AI, the tech space. There has been an increase, I think, in life sciences. I think you may have mentioned this to me, Abby, around 9% to 15% of general partners sitting at VCs that are female, which is still higher than it was, but still very low. And actually, globally, outside of life sciences, it's probably less than 10% of actual general partners in VCs are women. So there's probably this kind of balance, and that we need to kind of create within that world. But what about from a policy change, any corporate initiatives? Is there anything in your mind, Sheila, that comes to play that maybe we could change, or we could look at adapting or changing the narrative with?
Yeah, and actually, before I jump into this question, I do. So I think raising money is very difficult, right? And raising money right now on the private or the public side is very challenging. Definitely, I can speak from the life sciences perspective, from therapeutics, from platform companies. There's just across the board. We're seeing the public markets very, very
Yeah.
challenging time, and that's definitely spilling through onto the private companies because of the challenges all the venture funds and different investment funds are experiencing. Having said that, I do think it's harder to raise money as a woman. I do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just want to call a spade a spade. I think I think I've experienced this, even for someone with my track record, in my exits and, what I've accomplished. I think, and I just want to say that for all for
Yeah.
people who are, out there, because I think that, and no fault, no blame. I think there is just, conscious and unconscious bias. There are these networks. There are that have been in existence for a long time. Investment funds and the decision makers at these funds are predominantly men. There are very, very few women who are at the senior ranks. And I think, as I mentioned, when you're looking to do business with people, even doing deals or anything that regards them, you tend to want to have that trust, that credibility. If you know someone, if you have mirrors that look like you just feel really comfortable, and I did a TEDx talk on this, but when women don't have those mirrors or aren't working in within those networks, or don't just have access to building those types of relationships, it's just a little bit, it's more challenging. So
I'm sure. Sorry, Sheila, go on.
No, and I'm thrilled that there are more women stepping into these, higher levels in these investment funds. But I just want to acknowledge that I think that there's a lot of challenge. I've even been told not too long ago, well, this is great. Let's just partner you with a gray-haired man, and this will be all set. What? I don't think so. So I just want to mention these things happen. Obviously, there's lots of different investors out there. But I think that's really something to be acknowledged.
No, and I appreciate that, Sheila. And I think sometimes, the elephant in the room, it has just got to be said, and people have experienced different things, and more often or not, even the people I'm speaking to in our community group have experienced situations very similar to what you've just said there, Sheila. So I think that we've got to focus on a forward future perspective. What are, maybe Melanie, in your mind, or Sheila as well chiming in with Abby, is what do you think of some of the forward focused things that we could be doing? So for example, some of the things in the community group that were plugged in were things like could it be unanimous pitching, or blind pitching? Clearly that we need to maybe have a close the gap.
I jump in?
You go in with that, Sheila.
Positive, because I'm also really, really encouraged by all the amazing work women founders, executives, investors are doing. I think we have to be optimistic to be in the biotech area. We always say this in biopharma, and I am an optimistic person. So for example, co-founding the Biotech CEO Sisterhood, we're over 300 women CEOs from all different areas, small first-time CEOs to public company CEOs, multiple-time entrepreneurs, women who've had amazing exits, and allies who are very supportive of this effort. We have these networks in place, and we can be very, support women CEOs and founders in their initiatives. I think there's a lot of great work being done at academic institutions. I shout out to Sangeeta Bhatia at MIT for all the work she's doing to help women founders, really be a mirror to all these, women scientists at, such an amazing institution, and work that's going on with many academic institutions. I do work here at the Salk Institute and Scripps, and really meeting with women scientists to show them to introduce these ideas that you can actually start companies and you can be a founder, kind of introducing those ideas and supporting them in ways and through these different programs. I think there's other efforts coming up that are supporting women founders. There's lots of investment groups that are looking for female-led companies, whether it's a founder or an executive sitting on the board, or executives or other aspects. So, and willing to do more seed funding for those individuals. And then there's obviously policy changes and things that are happening in investment funds to support, more diversity type of leadership.
Yes, I think I've seen that actually. There's like increased access, like grants, aren't there? That I think the US have been backing and doing some funds and grants. Is it for startup organisations, SBIR, I think, or STTR grants? And then obviously in the UK, we've got the Investing in Women Code, which has been trying to support more female founders. So I think that's really encouraging. So I think that's really good. Melanie, from your perspective, is there anything that you feel strongly about? Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. So a nod to what Sheila was saying, it's not easy to raise money, and this environment is tough, I think, for everyone. And then when someone does look like you, the studies indicate that they trust you with money more, and that could probably lead to some investment. But from a founder perspective, if I had an ask, it would be because I've been thinking about this for a while, it would be for really good mentorship and mentorship connections. I think I've struggled to find good mentors. There's always a little bit of nervousness when a man takes on a younger woman as a mentor, right? And I think, that's warranted, right? But it can impact relationships in a meaningful way. And one thing I think I've experienced, and I've seen other women founders I know, and we've had some deep conversations about this. What happens is, as a woman founder, you've got to be so good. You've got to be so good to get that funding. You've got to be the top of the top, and you're working so hard and you've convinced yourself and everyone else you can truly do anything. Now, even the best founders in the world, we have our gaps, right? We have things that we are not as insightful about or we're not as good at. And the best thing to do is to hire someone really good at that, right? to help you out. And, you know, someone who can help you point out those gaps in a way that doesn't make you feel defensive or defective, because as a woman, I feel like we're always out there proving that we are that good. And so, you know, some really detailed, thoughtful mentorship for female founders, I think could go a long way.
Yeah, I love that. That's some great advice.
I think that there's, if I can just jump in for a second here, I think that, you know, we all know this, that, you know, when you're an N of one, right? You know, and you're more memorable. That's good and bad, right? And so when you know, somebody's going to remember that woman. Who is that woman? They might not remember your name, but, you know, who is that woman who came in? You know, what did they do? So to I think Melanie's point, your game has to be that much better, right? Because they're going to pay that much more attention to every little thing that you're saying. They're not going to get into, excuse me for being, you know, rude, but you're not going to get the little bromance going when you walk into the room and somebody says, "Oh my God, I love that quarter zip," you know, or whatever. It's just not going to be that way. And so you have to be memorable from that, you know, maybe what you've done. I think that's a big part of it, but it's also like, oh my God, that person just knocked my socks off. The way they pitched to me, the trust that they engendered, because it's kind of like, to your point, they want to be able to trust you, but if you're showing that humility and you're coming in with a balance of the data and the story and everything, you're going to be memorable in a positive way. Either way, you're going to be memorable because you're different than most other people, and the expectations are just that much higher for any N of one.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. So I think there's some great takeaways there. A lot of takeaways from different angles. Sorry. So we've got things from the policy changes, from the disparities and the differences, certainly at leadership level in some of these VCs. I think the mentorship, the sponsorship, right from academia, really early stages, doesn't matter at what point in your career. I think it's surrounding yourself with those inspiring people that have got a similar passion to you, that you can then, like you said, Melanie, almost identify maybe the gaps in your own experience so you can plug that in. I think that, you know, I mean, I hope I'm not, you know, saying anything out of line here, but I know with Prellis, you brought in a recent CEO, and you were like, "That's amazing," you know, and he's absolutely amazing. He's been so well received, but you've kind of, you know, there's a lot of founders that can find that quite difficult to let go, but you were like, "No, I've identified where my strengths and weaknesses are. His weaknesses are actually the business is going to flourish because of this, this, and this. I'm going to let them do that. I'm now doing Lyrics Bio," and it's brilliant, isn't it? Really.
So I think as a founder, it's important to. I just want to quickly bookend that, if you don't mind. As a founder, it's really important to understand your own strengths and weaknesses and your goals in starting the company. So my goal was never to personally take it public. I thought, hey, I'm fresh out of academia. If I can get this technology to work to a level where I can recruit the top talent in the industry, which I believe I have, to take this on. You know, Mike Nohaley was great at Amgen. He did a lot of phenomenal work there. And, you know, he was great at Generate Bio. And then, you know, he got inspired by Prellis. I feel like that was my big win. And, you know, the company is going to flourish under him. So that's exciting for me as a founder.
Yeah, no, I love it. I just think it's a really important mindset and a milestone that you kind of had throughout your journey. We are running out of time. I'm suddenly just panicking because of the time.
Double tap that on Melanie. That's so great.
That's all right, Sheila.
Thank you. Founders. And it's always like, you know, when I always have this discussion, and I won't even work with them unless we talk about we're aligning on doing what's best for the company.
Yes,
that is the goal. Always.
That is the goal. Yeah. And so, and I think that level of, you know, the maturity, the vision, the goal. Of course, everyone has different goals, but I think that is so important. And I just want to say kudos to you and for all that you've done and what you've built, and
thank you,
and just your maturity. And you know, I think when we do what's right for the patient and do what's right for our technology and the science, like everything works out. Like hopefully it's best.
Yeah, no, I love that. And thank you, Sheila. I appreciate you have to duck out, but everything you're doing in the CEO Sisterhood and I mean, that is exactly this. It's bringing CEOs, founders, new founders that are perhaps on a new journey that can be inspired and listen and get support and network from others. And that's what all these community groups are about. So thanks for joining us, Sheila, today. I'd love to come to you, Melanie and Abby, with just a final question, if that's okay.
I said
Before
double
we
tap,
dial off.
not duck out. I'm still here.
Absolutely, that's fine. You go for it. No worries. But yeah, well,
Oh, yeah.
Melanie, just a question then for you, was, what bit of advice would you give to women looking to start their own business? Same for Sheila, actually, if you have a minute to answer this, but if there was one bit of advice that you would give, what would that be?
Figure out what you're not good at and just start reading about it, reading books and asking questions. You need clarity on your vision for the company, and then you need to do your best to learn what you don't know, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said good things about networking. I mean, one piece of advice is almost impossible, because when you're a founder, you're doing everything and you have to learn quite a bit. But learn, try to understand what you don't know. Try to get at least a cursory understanding of, when I came from the sciences, what is a term sheet and why do they call PowerPoint presentations decks? What is a deck, right?
Yeah.
And so, really like the basics and make sure you're well versed in that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Melanie. And Sheila, this question for you, if you've got time.
Love Melanie's advice. Absolutely. For me, I believe everything always starts with ourselves. So from my perspective, I think it's really believing in yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's a hard journey to start any business, but just, really having that confidence in yourself that you can achieve your goals and you can actually build a business. Doing that internal work just to make sure that you develop that resilience, because founders have to be resilient. Mm-hmm. Executives and small startups have to be resilient. There's always so many unexpected twists and turns. So kind of building that resilience and not taking things too personally, and doing whatever you can to develop that maturity, I think will really set you up for success as you're building those networks, as you're getting as smart as you can be, throwing 150% in to understand everything you can about whatever it is you're trying to develop, but also like all those different aspects of the business. And then finding people to work with, people you trust, again, that, find your people, that board director, your mentors, your sponsors, finding people who can help you along your journey is really critical. And it takes time to build those relationships. So you have to put yourself out there and invest in those relationships. And I also think being as helpful as you can to others is a great thing, because I think
goes around comes around. Yeah,
exactly. And I do that a lot with investors. I try to be as helpful as I can be. So when you develop a relationship with them and they ask you, hey, can you look at this for me, or help them diligence something, or say, look, I can offer my services. I have a lot of deep expertise in this area. So if you have a question, I would be happy to help you diligence that kind of technology if you're ever that is so valuable. And it's not even around your own company, but if you can build those relationships and provide help and, services to others, like that usually can, really serve you well in terms of your efforts in the long run.
Yeah, love that. No, thank you, Sheila. Very authentic. And Abby, same question really, because I know that you've also founded businesses. So same question to you, but also a bit of a spin here as well. Would you give one bit of advice would you give any female founders pitching to investors? Is there anything there that you would recommend?
Yeah, I think that there's, I'd probably make this comment to somebody if they were female or not. But I think that especially, I think for women who are, sort of having to make that impression, really sort of understand the value proposition that you're bringing in. So many founders, especially on the science side, they bring in something that's cool and they have a vision for it, but they don't necessarily articulate the way that it's going to create value for the investors, because that we have to see a return at some point in time. It doesn't have to be immediately. And so differentiation is another component. If you're working in an area where other people are working too, don't be shy. Go right out there and say, look, I have utmost respect for what this team is doing, but
Yeah.
what
This
we're
is what makes
doing,
us different.
and
Yeah.
it's really amazing. And we know that we can get to this inflection point for this much money. And by getting to that inflection point, we're going to sort of open up future opportunity. And I think so many people come in and they just pitch their technology and
Yeah.
they just tell the today story as opposed
Yeah.
to the future
The
story.
future. Yeah.
And I just think that somebody who comes in and really talks about value creation moving forward is going to be looked at differently. So the more women who go in with that, the more noticed they're going to be.
I absolutely love that, Abby. Some great bits of advice and takeaways there. And I must say, I do apologise not getting to you as an audience. There's been so much coming through here, but there's been some great things to share from the key speakers. So totally agree with the mentorship part. Truly would appreciate a mentor who could be, true guiding light. Love that. Libette's a regular and has been part of the community group for a long time. Excellent reflections and guidance. Thank you for your time today. Great conversations today from Georgia. Another one, thank you. You're all inspirational. We've got Tari here who's tuning in from San Diego. Love listening to Sheila and the other super impressive speakers. I've worked 20 plus years in BD from both non-profit and for profit, currently in a big pharma. That's great. We got this organization supports women-led startups with guidance. Thank you very much, Melissa, for putting in that link. That'll be accessible to anybody afterwards. We've got Zin as well. Thanks for the candid discussion and sage advice. Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. Thank you so much for everybody that's coming in and joining. What I'd like to leave on, because obviously I know it is the International Women's and Girls in Science. So, just a bit of a call to action. If you know any women in STEM, take a moment today to recognize their contributions. And if you are a position of influence and you hold a position of influence, whether a senior leader, consider how you can help leveling the playing field. So just want to leave that with you, because I know it's the International Women's and Girls of Science Day today, but thank you so much for everybody that has joined us. Thank you for all of your comments, and thank you, Sheila, Melanie and Abby. Truly inspirational and great bits of advice and to take away. We've got another live broadcast which is happening in March. I actually can't believe I'm saying March. Like, feels like we've just entered 25, doesn't it? But I think it's happening on the 11th, and it's obviously to celebrate International Women's Day for the International Women's Week that week in March. So going to be super excited to be back live on screen in about 4 weeks' time. So thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you, key speakers. It's a pleasure. Over and out. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Louise.